I must confess, tool I prefer to use is this scraper. Turning a bowl with a scraper.
How fast could you go in there?
418. I've never had a lathe with a speed readout on it. So I have no clue how fast I usually turn. I have no idea. This one has a readout, 418. Okay, it's starting to shake. So I'll back off a little bit. Well, like I said, anything that I'm going to be removing is with the center of rotation. The shaking is not going to change. Yeah, something that thick. And I prefer doing a pull cut when using this thing. But yeah, that's all you're going to get. And you get a lot of it. You know, the guy in our club describes this as just coffee grounds. But I do get a better, more consistent cut finish on this with this tool than I do with the bowl gouge. I've tried a number of different tools trying to take a bigger cut. And that doesn't always work out so well because these things can also be very brittle. When I was turning this one, it's the most brittle one yet. I was trying to do the majority of this part with a bowl gouge. And trying to take, slightly bigger bites. I wouldn't be at this all day. I blew chunks out of it this big. It was so brittle, and there's no real grain direction, so it wouldn't just chip. It would just come out in blocks. And after knocking out 2 or 3 pretty good-sized pieces, I decided I was going to go beyond where I was hoping to make the bowl. So I switched to this guy. I was making this circular. I cut myself a circle template, decided I actually wanted to make one circle. I'd never done that before. And even though this was giving me fits, I was still sticking with that idea. And it took me 3 days to do the inside of this one. I'd work on it for a few hours, my feet would get tired, and I'd go inside, and I'd grumble at myself. But after working on it for, I don't even know how many hours it was, I finally got it. But I was taking just minute shavings, because if I went any deeper, I'd blow out pieces of it. Thankfully, most of these have not been that brittle. But like I said, this particular one gave me fits in several different ways. But I still like it. When putting finish on these, you'll notice some of these are really dark. I like to use walnut oil, but in these burls, the difference in density, they're just pockets of density, pockets of very high dense stuff, and pockets that'll just soak up anything you put on it. And I'd put on some oil, and it would look wonderful. And soak in a lot of it almost immediately. So I put on some more, and I put on some more. And ended up getting something a whole lot darker than what I was wanting to do. And we had Jimmy Clues coming to our club a few years ago, and he starts talking about putting finish on Australian Burls, and some people just put oil on there like crazy and makes it all dark. He says, use sanding sealer. Put a layer of sanding sealer on there first, and it'll minimize the amount of oil absorption, which is how I did that. So I got a nice sheen all over it, got some of the depth from the oil, but I didn't turn it, 20 or 30 shades darker than it was supposed to be. And that worked quite nicely. I just wish I'd known about it for some of these others. You have to figure out what design you're going to want to do based on what you'd like it to be, and also the limitations of the shape of the burl, the high spots and low spots, where the center of gravity, center of mass is. There are a lot of things to consider in how you want it to be shaped. But with every one of these, the first thing I do every time, regardless of what shape I'm shooting for, I true up the face. I want to work from a trued up face before I do anything else. Like for doing this, in this I have to use a bowl gouge in order to make this sharp corner here. I just start cutting up to here till I have a depth that I want. It's totally arbitrary. And I don't start cutting out the bowl on the inside until I have this rim defined. And then just start cutting it out, and the thickness is also arbitrary. It can be whatever, whatever you want to do. When you first put one of these on, lock the spindle and try to twist this. If you can move this, don't turn it on. You're not done. In fact, if you move it too much, then you're probably starting over. But yeah, if this moves, you don't want to do that. The very first one of these I didn't grab it and test it because I was afraid I was going to break it. I stood well over here, and I was scared to death every time I turned it on. And when I was done, I thought, well, that's cool. All I got to do is lock the spindle, then just twist. And I fully expected every one of these wedges to simply fall over, and I'd be able to break it off. I couldn't get it off. And then I'm standing there laughing at myself because the couple of days I just spent turning this lovely thing, and I had no idea how to get it off. Alcohol. And it doesn't really matter what kind, apparently. This is isopropyl alcohol. HEB sells it just like this in a spray bottle. And it probably, if you leave it there long enough, it'll dissolve the glue, but it will loosen the bond. And the beautiful thing is, it doesn't do anything to the surface of the burl. The glue lifts off. I have never damaged the surface of any of these peeling off this hot melt glue. This hot melt is perfect for this project. And as soon as you finish squirting glue in there, it's set. You're ready to go. You don't have to wait at all. Yes, sir. Okay, so one thing I did mean to show, even though I've already turned some of this, once you get this mounted sideways, then, can this camera see in here? There will be gaps. There will be a lot of gaps along the sides here where you glued in the strips. Before you start turning, fill in those gaps on both sides all the way around. And I saved this to demonstrate to do this here and then forgot to do it, because I also run a bead along the bottom edge all the way around, every single one, reinforcing the hold. I obviously can't get to the far side of the innermost one, but don't be shy with the glue, because it's quite literally all standing between you and a trip to the ER. Actually, I said that when I was demoing this at my own club, and the guy in the front says, or the morgue. Yeah, I suppose that's possible.
Now, you're talking about putting the bead right up against the burl at the top of that wedge?
Yes. Well, because since this is a natural surface, the shape can be anything. And so try as you might to customize, angles and bevels and whatever on the ends of these things, there's still going to be gaps. So, yeah, there'll be a lot of visible gaps on both sides, and just pump it full of glue. Because anytime there's air in there, that means it's not being held. It's always a good idea to have something soft to do this on, because you don't want to mar the surface you've just created. All right. So just pick one. It doesn't really matter where, but it does help to do that. You probably don't want to do a whole lot of this in an enclosed shop. Let's go with the next. All right. Let's see. This is a very delicate operation, of course.
You're a retired dentist?
No? If you got some teeth to come out, I could probably accommodate you if you're not that particular about how I do it. And when you're done turning one of these things, turning it and sanding it, you need to be really, really, really sure that you are done turning and sanding it. Take this sucker off, you're done. You find tool marks on it, that's too bad. Unless you're going to be sanding them out by hand. If you decide you don't like the shape or it wasn't quite deep enough or whatever, well, that's just too bad. And for the bits of glue that are still there, got some needle nose pliers and a pair of tweezers, some of these tweezers. Squirt on some more alcohol. And if you let it sit for a few minutes, which I don't have time to do, but if you let it sit for a few minutes, they'll just lift right off. The glue can leave some very fine hairs, especially on those that are heavily spiked. Moving the gun in and out while you're gluing it up will leave hairs in between those spikes. And it is disturbingly surprising how many of them can still be there, and you think you're done. You come along and spray some Deft lacquer on there, and guess what starts collecting beads of lacquer? So I have found it useful. Turn off the lights in the shop. Have a single light at the side to shine across. And it helps to illuminate any glue that is still left behind. And it'll light up the strands. Now you might still discover some when you go in. The only finish I do on the outside of this part, is some spray deft satin lacquer. I really don't want to change the look of it at all, but I do need to protect it. So I use the satin lacquer, and after a few coats of it, it starts to shine a little bit. But that's really all I want to do to it. Okay, downsides to this method. There are some. This sucker is heavy. You know, you like to create a nice, lightweight, thin bowl, and that's not what you get here. These things are heavy. The spikes are sharp. This one is actually painful to hold. Having the gloves helps. If it rests on the palm of the glove, then that helps. But it can actually hurt a little bit to hang on to one of these things because of the weight and the spikes. Especially one like that. And not so much on this one, but all those little voids, especially the little narrow sharp ones like that, those do a fantastic job of collecting fuzz from buffing wheels. And they collect the Tripoli very nicely too. So I'm careful about buffing these now. I end up spending a lot of time with a needle cleaning out all the buffing compound. And on this one, I don't know if you can see, but the cracks go all the way through. Which I didn't know when I was turning it. I found out afterwards. Oh, okay. It's a good thing I didn't know that while it was spinning. Sanding sealer, which can have a similar effect that the oil does.
You dilute it or use it straight?
This is straight. This is Zinsser. Zinsser, Z-I-N-S-S-E-R, is that right? And so the color transformation, the depth comes popping out. And now after putting a coat of this on first, this is pretty much exactly what it'll look like by the time I'm finished with it. The walnut oil will increase the depth to some extent, and it will darken it just a little. I usually just do one coat of the walnut oil. Is usually all that's needed after the sanding sealer. I might do two. Oh, missed a bit. But having this on first has made a big difference. Stuff dries very quickly. Okay, I think I've said everything I needed to say. Anybody have any other questions?
Thank you, Drew.
All right, thank you.